Well, here we are again, the end of another year, the end of more video games. 2019, it was an interesting year. Definitely video games happened, some of them more than others, some of them less, and I feel like there were less big standout, here is the fucking golden crowned, jeweled, everyone loves it type of game. It was more like, hey, do you like this thing? Maybe you like it and I don't. And that was fine. I think it was interesting, in fact. Which makes my list kind of cool. Some cool games on here, some ones I really enjoyed playing. Lots of good stuff. Shout out to Astral Chain, because that game is probably my number 11. Just a little bit too long, a little bit bloated at the end, but god, there's no better feeling this year than throwing cans into a bin in Astral Chain. It's fucking amazing. Or just sweeping up the red matter with your Legion. Love that stuff. So, in any case, let's get on with it. Here are my top 10 games of the year 2019. Pokemon Sword. Prior to Pokemon Sword and Shield, I didn't really follow what was going on with these new entries. I've been out of Pokemon for a good few years now, so when the leaks happened, I didn't really have much desire to go and seek them out. I was pretty much sold on playing this game just because it was based in the UK and because it had been so long since I'd played one, as well as it being the first real entry on the Switch. Man, I was really surprised by how much joy I got out of this game. Seeing new Pokemon for the first time is something I haven't experienced since the start of the franchise. It was a unique joy every time I stumbled across something like Squavet or Rookidee, and a unique nightmare when I discovered the horror show that is Galarian Meowth. The paring back of the Pokedex meant that for the first time I actually cared about exploring each patch of grass to find and catch as many as I could. The changes made to finding Pokemon, with some showing up on the map where others are hidden, was a fantastic compromise, and it meant that you could, if you wanted to, just skip past wild creatures and not encounter them. So much of this game is streamlining, be it the ultra-competitive side, allowing nature changing and IV manipulation, or the simple ability to just access your boxes anywhere and change your nickname or relearn moves in every Pokemon Center. The game is all about making your life easier. The eternal XP share is a thing I don't really understand why anyone would complain about. I honestly wish that all modern JRPGs had this feature. And the soundtrack. I think this is the best OST a Pokemon game has ever had, and constantly had me wanting to play it with the headphones, which is a rare feat. Yes, the world is small and seems to have more depth than it actually does, but I've come to expect less and less from this series, and the fact that it even gave us something like the wild area is kind of a miracle, to be honest. Encountering a level 50 Steelix and being able to take it down with my level 30 Drizzile was pretty great. This game doesn't change the world, but it made me so happy that it deserves a spot in my top 10. Gears 5. So this is a weird game to show up on my list. I'd never played a Gears of War game before this year, and to be honest, after trying the remastered version of Gears 1 on Game Pass, I didn't think I'd ever finish one. That original game has aged very poorly and just wasn't a good experience in any way. Thankfully, the series has moved forward, and I think that is so clear with Gears 5. This game opens with a lush, gorgeous forest environment with splashing pools and verdant greens. The total opposite to what the series has become known for. I did some reading up on the lore and story, but honestly you can drop into Gears 5 and not miss too much, but they also do a fantastic job of establishing characters and relationships early on so you know where everyone stands. Kate and Del are at the heart of this game, and you spend the majority of the large second act with these two, fleshing out who they are and their past with disgraced comrade JD. This game really feels like the Coalition took note from the most recent Uncharted game, Lost Legacy, in terms of its pacing and moment-to-moment gameplay. Yes, shooting is still at the core of Gears, and I hardly think that will ever change. It's really good, and the active reload system had me more engaged with these gunfights than with most third-person shooters. But the in-between spaces, like the camp where you can wander around and listen to conversations, as well as pick up collectibles, showed me that this series was willing to try something new. Both Acts 2 and 3 are built around this semi-open world environment that's incredibly fun to explore on the Skiff, a vehicle that feels great to roam around in. Sure, the side objectives are minor, but I loved visiting them all, if only to get more conversations between the characters. The dialogue is surprisingly heartfelt and really well delivered. Gears 5 is not a game that I ever expected to be near my top 10, but its gorgeous visuals, amazing set pieces, and dramatic narrative made it one of the biggest surprises in years. Katana Zero. Sometimes there are games that come out of nowhere and just bowl you over. Katana Zero is not exactly one of those, as I had been following it since around 2015, but I was absolutely bowled over by it. I knew it was a one-man development effort and was very into its entire aesthetic, but I wasn't prepared for some of the things this game does and the surprises it has in store. At its core, Katana Zero is an action game where you play a samurai in a cyberpunk-esque city, two styles that mix surprisingly well. It plays in some senses like a side-scrolling Hotline Miami, where you murder your way through rooms of bad guys with speed and precision. The core mechanic is the ability to slow down time that helps you to deflect bullets back at guys or dodge past them. You can also pick up objects that can be thrown as distractions or as weapons, and there are definitely a bunch of things in the environment that can also be used to take people out. It's definitely one of those games where you die a bunch before executing your perfect run, and also has a replay mechanic that shows you a sped up version of your actions. However, the things that make Katana Zero cool are things I can't really talk about for fear of spoiling it. There are narrative fourth wall breaks, really interesting ways that it plays with dialogue and time, and moments where the gameplay completely upends itself and the experience becomes something entirely new. Pack in some phenomenal boss fights, a beating rhythmical soundtrack, and straight up some of the most painstakingly perfect pixel art animation I've ever seen, and you'll understand why I hold Katana Zero in such high regard. It definitely ends on a cliffhanger, and I wish there had been more, but for one person to create a game this polished and refined is certainly a feat. Don't skip out on Katana Zero, because it's damn good. Star Wars Jedi: Fallen Order. As big a Star Wars fan as I am, I've never played that many Star Wars games. There were the handheld movie tie-ins, alongside a PS1 Phantom Menace game that defined my childhood, but since then I haven't played many. And that's mainly because a lot of them haven't been very good. EA's handling of the franchise has been pretty diabolical, with Battlefront 2's loot box debacle dominating much of the conversation surrounding the game. But finally they announced something that had the potential to be good. A single-player, lightsaber-focused game from Respawn, who in my eyes have yet to put a foot wrong. And I think they finally did it. They made a good Star Wars game. Now, Fallen Order is far from perfect. I wish the Force powers were more interesting, or at least you had more leeway with them in combat, and I didn't like fighting multiple enemies at once. It cribs from Souls, but doesn't quite nail it. The game certainly has its fair share of technical issues, from frame rate jankiness to a general feeling of unpolished sheen, and Wookiees that just look like awful spaghetti monsters. That said, god damn, I could not put this game down. Something about the story dragging me along and the interweaving level design, alongside some great exploration, that sure only led to some meager skins, made Fallen Order such a compelling game. The one-on-one lightsaber duels were easily my favourite combat encounters in the game, and that feeling of being a Jedi was never more apparent than during those moments. Parrying, dodging, and getting in those important hits had never felt so satisfying. And as you gain more Force powers and unlock more of Cal's backstory, you do start to care more about this smaller, more intimate narrative. There are moments that really stuck with me, and there is such a solid foundation here that can be built upon to create something even better. Devil May Cry 5. Devil Trigger is always stuck in my head, but it's always stuck there alongside the cinematic opening to this game where Nero slow-mo flips around the van shooting demons point blank as he goes. It's a bombastic cutscene that underscores everything I love about Devil May Cry 5. Spectacle, style, and self-reverence. DMC5 knows it's fucking stupid, and it hangs on to that rope all the way through. All three characters play so differently and are also incredibly fun to master. Nero's various arms offer fantastic variety alongside his bread and butter sword combos. The punchline was my favourite as it just pummels enemies for you. V adds a completely new flavour as you control his beasts independent of himself. Finishing off enemies by warping to them and sticking your staff in the middle was among the most satisfying combat moments in the game. And then there is Dante, who sticks a middle finger up to common sense with his twin motorcycles that eviscerate enemies. His stance changes, ridiculous arsenal, and swagger make him such an incredibly fun character to play as. All this to say that action is at the core of why Devil May Cry works. Sure, the environments get a little samey towards the end, and I would have liked a few more over-the-top action set pieces, but ultimately the game excels at its core, and that core is incredibly fun. I've never been one to learn super long combos because keeping all those button presses in your head is really tough. but Devil May Cry 5 makes things pretty simple while allowing you to pull off amazing looking moves. The mark of a good action game to me is one where you can feel like you're doing amazing stuff, even if you don't necessarily have the skill to pull it off on your own. DMC5 nails that feel, and is why I had such an amazing time with it. Luigi's Mansion 3. Poor Luigi. I mean, he did have that 1 year to himself, but it was also the year when Nintendo and the Wii U were failing and on the ropes. Not a great time to be pushed to the forefront. But Luigi's Mansion has always been a cult classic. The 3DS sequel was something I don't think a lot of people expected, but after it successfully brought the franchise back, I think a lot of people were anticipating a third game. Being amongst that crowd, I certainly wasn't blown away when they revealed Luigi's Mansion 3. It seemed like it would be more of the same, but how wrong I was. In many ways, sure, Luigi's Mansion 3 is more of the same, but it's also a game that's just bursting with personality and surprise. Additions like the suction attachment and the slam move make busting ghosts so much more streamlined. No more getting dragged around a room and slipping over haphazardly placed bananas for the 10th time. Luigi is a genius addition that not only makes for a great co-op experience, but also adds another layer to puzzle solving and rethinking the spaces around you. His ability to go through vents but be susceptible to water is just enough to make him stand out, while also having all of Luigi's other abilities. And the flaws, my goodness, the flaws. The variety on display here, not only in terms of themes but aesthetics and gameplay as well, is so incredible. I was blown away by the theme park vibe that this game constantly evoked, and loved that some floors were purely built for boss fights as opposed to exploration. It gave the game a great sense of diversity that always had me excited to see what was next. Yes, there is some backtracking that forces you into enemy kill rooms and seems to just be padding, but aside from those few diversions, Luigi's Mansion 3 is an incredibly enjoyable experience that is without a doubt the best game in the series, and sets a new bar for next level that will be tough to top. Apex Legends. So we've already had one Respawn game on this list, but this is the one that truly came out of nowhere and knocked people off their feet. I am not a Battle Royale person. I didn't care for the grimy, janky aesthetic of PUBG, and I just couldn't care less about learning to build in Fortnite. The market simply wasn't giving me a Battle Royale that appealed to my sensibilities. Then Apex Legends happened. Respawn are one of my favourite studios because they got me into first-person shooters. Without Titanfall, I don't know that I ever would have tried Overwatch. That is to say that they do first-person movement and gunplay better than almost anyone else, and Apex Legends feels fantastic to play. It leans heavily on the arsenal of weapons from the Titanfall universe, but the mix of shotguns, assault rifles and pistols are also varied with different attachments and mods that shakes things up even more. But this game works so well because it truly innovates within the genre. Forcing you into teams is one thing, but if you can't communicate with a group, you are doomed to failure. This is the reason that the versatile ping system is such a crucial addition. You don't need to deal with toxic voice chat and can still communicate exactly what you want to other players with contextual actions. Hell, even when I was on voice chat with Bally, it was helpful to point out a weapon to him and not have to stand there waiting as he came over to me. This, alongside the various abilities that each character has, the revive mechanic and the ability to fully respawn team members, makes the Battle Royale experience that much more approachable. Now don't get me wrong, I suck at this game and would no way be able to win on my own if given the chance. But being able to contribute to a team and do your part to earn a victory and become champions of the arena is a fantastic feeling. It's a game I've gone back to all year and cement Respawn as one of the very best developers in the industry. Fire Emblem Three Houses. It's a strange time we live in where the main takeaway I have from a new Fire Emblem game is the story and the characters. This has for a long time been one of my favourite series, but it's always been because of the tactics. I love leveling units and promoting my army, taking them through battle after battle to finally emerge at the end with an unstoppable group that tears up the competition. I relish the challenge of a difficult scenario or map, and love when a Fire Emblem game has diversity in its objectives. But Three Houses doesn't really do that. Sure, the maps are alright, They look pretty cool, and the later chapters certainly provide a bit more challenge, but that isn't the focus here. Instead, so much of my time was taken up by the monastery, where I would garden, fish, have tea with people, go for meals to boost my professor level and student relationships, enter the fighting tournament and buy gifts. The monastery makes Fire Emblem into more of an RPG than it has ever been, allowing you to focus on all these systems outside the tactics that will eventually build into one another. No matter what house you choose, you'll get attached to those students. You'll want to nurture them down certain paths and plan what classes they'll end up being. This micromanagement was one of my favourite aspects of the game, and getting Linhardt to finally become a Holy Knight or Casper to become a War Master were moments of immense satisfaction because I put in the work for them to get there. Even though the monastery eventually became very rote and something I would speed through, I would still take the time to do as much as possible just so I could build up support conversations with every unit. The writing and voice acting is the best it's ever been in the series, with these characters feeling like actual people for the first time. Hearing about their struggles and stories was amongst the best stuff in the game, alongside an A-plot which had a twist that completely broke me. I love that Fire Emblem constantly tries new ideas, and despite this game not nailing everything, it went in a bold direction that paid off in so many ways. Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire blew me away. It was a game that had been on my radar for a while, but one that didn't look like it would appeal to me. A roguelike deck building game where you have to start over with a new set of cards every time? Sounded like something I wanted absolutely nothing to do with, but how wrong I was. Slay the Spire is one of the most brilliantly designed games I've ever played. Mark Brown did an excellent video breaking down what makes it so special, and at the core is synergies. Cards that work in conjunction with one another to create strategies you hadn't even thought of. And the reason synergies are so exciting in Slay the Spire is because you're constantly changing your deck. One of the most intimidating things about card games is building a set of cards that you're going to play with. It often requires a grander understanding of a metagame that often makes me not want to engage. But what makes this game different is that it only asks you to choose one card at a time. This slow build means that you create a deck over the course of many battles, and as a result start to understand what works and what doesn't. Added to this mix are the relics, which give you certain overarching boosts and makes your character a lot more flexible. The ways in which relics and cards interlink add yet another layer of strategy. But ultimately the moment-to-moment gameplay feels amazing as you think through turns, knowing when to block incoming damage and when to set up for a big turn of damage dealing yourself. The core loop is so incredible that it's a game I could easily see myself playing again and again for a very long time. The 3 different characters, each with their own playstyle and set of cards, keeps the game fresh, as well as the constant unlocking of new relics and cards. Even if you think this isn't the type of game for you, I urge you to give it a go, because it is a monumental achievement in game design and one of the very best games of this year. Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night. I remember putting Bloodstained Circle of the Moon as my number 10 game last year and mentioning that it may end up being better than the actual game I kickstarted. After the failure of Mighty No. 9 as well as backer updates that made Bloodstained not look all that appealing, I was ready to play Ritual of the Night and be disappointed that it couldn't be what I wanted it to be. I've never been happier to be wrong, because Bloodstained was the most fun I had with a game this year and was an experience I just couldn't put down. Fundamentally, this is another one of those. Yes, there are wacky and weird elements, some of the creatures are downright ridiculous and the arsenal of shards is as diverse as it is insane, but at the core of Bloodstained is an impeccably designed space that is incredibly fun to traverse, explore and get lost in. And getting lost is an important aspect of this experience. Unlike other Metroid-style games, the Castlevania lineage has always benefited from backtracking because it allows you further opportunity to grind experience and accumulate money. Could the signposting have been better? Sure. Could it have been made more obvious that I needed a specific shard to move underwater? Absolutely. But did I regret fumbling around the castle for a few hours as I figured it out? Not at all. The game feel is so perfect that the mere act of moving Miriam and killing monsters with your weapon of choice is satisfying enough that I would do it all day if I could. The side effect of getting lost is gaining that familiarity with the space, knowing where everything is and being able to go wherever you want without having to look it up or trying to pull it out the back of your mind. Not since Symphony of the Night has a castle been this fun to explore. The boss fights are tremendously ridiculous and can oftentimes be challenging, but there are also ways to completely break the game in two. I remember a fight where I beat the boss in 10 seconds flat because my weapon was insanely powerful and it felt amazing. And yes, there is a story that is very hammy and you barely need to pay attention to it, but the voice acting ain't too bad and certainly adds a flavour to the world. Overall, I had an absolutely fantastic time with Bloodstained, and I couldn't be happier that it's my game of the year for 2019. So there you have it, those are my favourite games of the year. It's been pretty good, as I said, some really fun things that came out and I had a great time discovering new games and obviously some things that felt very comfortable and nice to me. A few shout outs to some other things. Link's Awakening for making an average Zelda game look much more appealing and much more streamlined. Mario Maker 2 for still being really damn good, if a step back from the original in terms of the ease of creation. SteamWorld Quest for making me care about deck building and having really fun systems, still my favourite SteamWorld game. Dauntless for being a game I dumped a ton of hours into and still don't really know why, but I had a great time with it. Void Bastards for making a roguelite FPS with some of the best progression in these types of games, and for giving me some of those tense moments of the year. Blazing Chrome for fucking nailing the Contra feel and aesthetic as well as making it a bit more approachable. It's still fucking hard though. And finally to Extermination Force, a game that you are watching footage of right now, for being one hell of a boss battle game that more people need to play, seriously. If you have some money left over from Christmas, go on the Switch eShop, check out Extermination Force. It's a hell of a title. You'll enjoy it. You'll have a great time. Well, that's going to be it. Thanks, folks, for this year and everything, and have a good new year. Have a good 2020. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.